Uh,
You're good, Mike.
Good morning. One second. Let me redo how I'm seeing you. Great. It's probably good you're meeting to resume. I hear the weather looks pretty nasty outside, so ultimately it's nicer for all of us to zoom in. Today I want to think about a very difficult passage in the Bible, a very difficult episode, the rape of Dinah, Genesis 34, verses 1 through 31. I was thinking about this because I've been thinking about this theme of order and chaos. And I've also been thinking about this passage as well. I mean, I often wonder what do you do with these really, really difficult, horrible episodes in the Bible. So I won't read the entire verses, straight to end. I'll just talk us through it and read parts of the verses that are relevant for just build the story that I want to reflect on what it means or what it could mean. Dinah is the only daughter of Jacob. And while on a journey, Sachem, a member of the ruling Canaanite family, rapes Dinah. But then weirdly enough, I don't really understand what this means or how it really works out, but Sachem seems to fall in love with Dinah. Verse 3, chapter 34. Sachem's heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. This is after he rapes her. And then Sachem asked his father, Hamor, to get Dinah to become his wife. So Hamor goes to Jacob and he says to Jacob, I'm reading verse 8 and on, my son Sachem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry us, give us your daughters, and take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us. The land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, and acquire property in it. Then Sachem said to Dinah's father and brothers, let us find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the price for the bride, and the gift the gift I am to bring as great as you like. And I'll pay whatever you ask me. Only give me the young woman as my wife. Jacob responded to these negotiations with Sachem's family, but his sons resisted, and demanded the circumcision of all males in Sachem's family. Sachem and his family agreed to be circumcised, and then Sachem and his family were willing to try to make things right with Dinah. The verse goes on. The proposal seemed good to Hamor and his son Sachem. The young man who was the most honored of all his father's family, lost no time in doing what they said because he was delighted to be with Jacob's daughter. So Hamor and his son Sachem went to the gate of their city to speak to the men of the city. These men are friendly towards us, they said. Let them have our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters and they can marry ours. But the men agreed to live with us only as one people, only on one condition, that our males be circumcised as they themselves are. Won't their livestock and property and all their other animals become ours? So they agree to the terms, and they will settle among us. The brothers Simeon and Levi then break faith with new blood brothers.
Mike, sorry for interrupting.
There you go.
Can you not hear me?
Tim, you're on mute.
Tim, you're on mute.
No, I wasn't seeing your face, but now you're back again. I
Oh,
didn't know
sorry.
if I was
I'm sorry about that. I was trying to do something a little tricky with okay. How's that? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yep, it's fine now.
Okay. Thanks. Just interrupt me if something goes wrong again. Okay. So the brothers, the Jewish brothers, Simeon and Levi, Sachem's family had just been freshly circumcised, and they were circumcised as grown adults, not babies. So they're in a great deal of pain, and the healing's going to take longer. And they're in a great deal of pain. And so while the Canaanites were woozy with pain, possibly even drunk to kill the pain, the brothers murder Sachem and his father and every male in the town. The verse goes on. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister has been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else in their city out of the fields. They carried off all the wealth and their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the houses. Okay, well, that's just a horrible, horrible story in the Bible. And I've often wondered, what do you do with this story? I mean, what could you possibly find that's spiritually edifying or useful? Why would you read this and what do you do with it? A few observations on this episode. Sex and marriage are created by God as a promise and a covenant between a man and a woman, bound and promised in front of God. It's meant to be a gift toward humanity, the means by which God builds his church and builds humanity. And then rape is a perversion of love, sex, and marriage. And then another thing, I'm not saying that by circumcision, all these Canaanites would become the covenant people of God, but maybe the beginning, either way, it's a drastic step. Their adult male circumcision is a radical sign of some sort of commitment. But again, God instituted circumcision as a blessing, as an outward sign. The Jews were going to be covenant people of God. It's God's way of adopting people that are in alienation or rebellion against him. But then the brothers, the sons of the sons, they use circumcision as a vehicle of deception of violence. I think in both these cases, what's going on is perversion. So Satan took what was intended to be a good thing, sex, and distorts it, conforms it, and destroys it with the rape. And then the sons of Jacob took what was intended to be a good, beautiful thing, a wonderful thing, circumcision, and they pervert it as a vehicle of deception, murder, revenge, plunder, pillage, taking all the women and children, presumably as slaves. I mean, they take the circumcision and use it and turn it into a vehicle of a mini genocide. So what do we do with this story? What does it all mean? What can we possibly get out of this? Again, is there some kind of spiritual message in all this? Well, here's one. Here's something I've been thinking about. This whole episode is not prescriptive, to be clear. I mean, there's just nothing in here about how to manage your life or how to behave. Certainly, this is not a story about what to do if your daughter or sister gets raped. Maybe what we have to do is look at the story as a gigantic, horrific mess, a giant train wreck, a gigantic car pile up on 995. And I'm going to call what's going on here and call it chaos. Was any party right? Satan rapes Dinah. That's terrible. And even if Satan repents, the rape can't be undone. The trauma of what happened to Dinah can't be undone, even if he tries to heal it by building some kind of marriage or trying to make things right. Maybe there's a way to take something horrible and make it slightly less horrible, but this is horrible. And then he offers her anything at any price, the union of two tribes, circumcision of the tribes to rectify the situation. I mean, is that the right solution to this? No, I mean, it really doesn't look good. Maybe that's what they'll end up doing. Maybe in another world, that's what they end up doing with it. It just looks awful. Okay, so that's terrible. I don't think the solution to a rape is to marry the rapist. Okay, so what's the alternative? The brothers of Dinah, the sons of Jacob, they agree to the marriage and they say, this can't be right. They actually say, and they actually get very upset. They have this one quote where they say, is Dinah a prostitute that we married her off to the rapist? And I think that's a really good point. No, I mean, the idea of marrying Dinah off to the rapist does seem, well, dehumanizing, right? It seems to lack dignity for what and respect for what Dinah went through. So their response is to get revenge, deceive Satan's family, trick them into becoming circumcised, kill them all, plunder them, kill them, carry off the wives and children. This seems to me the most complete and utter expression of vengeance I can imagine. So God forbid someone does something terrible to my daughter or my daughters, and my solution would be to kill the person, kill their family, kill their entire village, kill their entire extended family, and burn and destroy and steal all their property. Okay, so that's like the opposite of the marriage option. And again, this vengeance approach seems to be terrible. So once again, this whole episode, after to bracket it off, just looks like pure chaos. Well, perhaps one way to think about this is what happens when we depart from God, when we break away from God's good and holy order. This is sin run amok. This is a picture of the world when sin is let free. Again, maybe the word for this in my mind is just pure chaos. I'd like to just maybe, this is not novel or new, but I'd like to possibly reframe maybe what we understand as the gospel message or what God's doing in the world as order and what Satan is doing in the world as chaos. And so maybe one way to, at least in my mind lately, what I've been thinking about, what is God doing in the world? What is God's story for the world? And what is God's will for my life? Order is God, chaos is Satan. Order is good, and chaos is just evil and sin. To think through this, I go back to the beginning, Genesis. One way I've been thinking about how to, and I'm not novel in this, just things I've been reading. One way to think about what's going on in Genesis as this creation narrative is that God is instituting order. God is always creating order out of chaos. In the beginning, the earth is described as formless and void. I get this image of, again, amorphous, slimy, a big pile of mush. There was no shape, no structure. It's random, it's chaotic. I mean, I think of like a body with no bones or organs. Instead of our organs, or if it was a body, it would just be pureed, in a big mixing blender, like a giant, and it's mushed up together with nothing there. And the creation narrative can be interpreted as God imposing order onto this random, structureless, primordial mush of creation. So if you look at the creation narrative, the first few chapters, a few verses, first he separates light from the darkness in the first day. He's like separating, pulling out the primordial elements and pulling them apart, giving them categories, and they give them a name, day and night. And then he separates the water on the second day. The waters are separated from the sky water to the ocean water, pulling them apart, creating a barrier and giving the name, sky, seas. And then he takes the seas and pulls the land out of the sea as a land, sea, creating separate categories. God seems to be in the activity of imposing structure, order, and divisions onto the universe. Again, this could be God's act of ordering things, categorizing things, separating things, creating distinctions. And then what Satan seems to do throughout creation is to undo, disrupt. Satan is not a creator, but someone who destroys and messes up things that are already made. I mean, and then again, a childish image might be, you have all these marbles, right? And you want to separate them into various colors, blues, greens, reds, browns, and put them in their own little bowls. And maybe Satan's the other kid who just wraps it all up and mixing things up and makes a big, mess out of it all the time. The first sin of Adam and Eve is to take God's commandment. I mean, God creates a garden, but then creates some divisions, some laws, some rules. Have everything, but don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Again, there seems to be some kind of division going on here, limitations, barriers, good barriers, things in their proper place. And then what Satan does, he tries to blur these divisions, saying, no, you can actually transgress into those barriers. And the means why he does that is to take God's words and just tweak it, morph it, mush it, make it all muddy and blurry. It's a perversion and a twisting of God's order. I mean, very similar to the way Satan took something like sex and marriage and twisted that. Just the way the sons of Jacob took something like circumcision and the bonding and union of different tribes. So I think it's actually God's order, right? I mean, I think God's ultimate order is for the world to be one tribe and be absorbed. And he took that, a good and holy impulse, and just distorted, twisted it. Again, perhaps you can think of godliness in our own lives as following God's structure and order. Again, and sin as chaos and disorder. I think more about, I wonder maybe what I'm supposed to do with my own life as I try to follow God as I get older. As I think more about what God's calling is in my life is to be an agent of order and work again the idea of chaos. In a small way, I mean, this is not why I became a historian, but I often wonder, what do I do as a historian? I mean, what can I do with my own life as this? I mean, let me take a hard shift and think about what I do with my life. There is this modern discipline of history, which I'm part of. I mean, but the practice of history, of people thinking about their past, talking about it, and in some cases writing it down, I suspect this act of history, broadly conceived, is as ancient as humanity. All humans have been telling stories about where we came from and what did our mom and dad do? What did our ancestors do? Why have we as humans been doing history since as long as we've been human? I think it's because we need to make sense of our lives. And I think the story of our history makes sense of our lives. It's interpretive, and by telling stories about ourselves, we're giving structure, order, and meaning to our collective lives. You could say the world just seems random. Okay, I mean, the existentialists, I mentioned Heidegger last time, their interpretation of life is, crap just happens for whatever. It's not that crap happens for whatever reason. There is no reason. Okay, stuff just happens and it doesn't mean anything. There's no rhyme or reason to any of this. It's like a box of random stuff just got thrown up in the air and this just lands wherever. And that's life. Again, this is how Heidegger and the existentialists talk about it. Stuff happens, and someone dies, someone's born, someone gets married, someone gets divorced. There's good and bad. And Heidegger and the existentialists would say it actually doesn't mean anything. It just happens, but we keep talking about it as if there's some meaning behind it, and our lives are to discover that meaning. I don't believe that's true. That's what existentialists say. But it also occurs to me that even if there were no God, even if the existentialists are correct and life is random, I'm pretty sure that we as human beings would have just, we did. We would have invented a God anyway, just to fill that void, because we can't tolerate the idea there's no God, even if hypothetically there were no God. And even if the world were random and meaningless and our lives made no sense, or history made no sense, I think we would invent a history. We would invent structure and order, because we just can't tolerate a world without order. So why is it that humans do history? Why have the humans been telling stories about themselves? Because I think that history is meaning making. It's order making. It's a way to say, this is what's happened to us. There must be a reason. There must be a plot line, right? There must be a narrative arc for why we are where we are, why things happen. So we create histories and structures of meaning. And then what we do is then we impose them on the past. And it occurs to me that's what I'm doing when I do history, when I do my own research. Basically what I do is I go to archives, I read old letters, I read diaries, read newspaper articles, I just read a lot of old books. And then I try to reorganize them in a sense, or turn them into a narrative story that makes sense. That's really what my life boils down to. I try to explain to my students who are in their first attempt at writing. I teach a senior seminar where they take their first stab as 21-year-olds trying to write their own histories based on the methods of history. And the metaphor I often use is like, imagine there's a big field out there that no one's ever seen before, never's ever really a virgin field. And my job is to go out there and just collect all sorts of rocks, out of this field. Some are black, some are blue, some are red, some are yellow, some are big, some are small, some are jaggedy, some are, oddly shaped. And what I do is I'm going to go to a gigantic empty warehouse. I'm going to take my barrels and barrels and wheelbarrows of rocks and just dump them all out. And then I'm going to spend I can spend a long time just categorizing the rocks in different shapes and colors. I'm trying to think, well, what categories are available, because I try to go in with no preconceived notions. And then I try to divide them by colors, shapes, smoothness, roughness. And once I got these categories done, then I spent a long time thinking, okay, well, how do I make sense of this? And so then I try to make a mosaic out of it. This is just a metaphor, I make a picture, and this picture is ordered and structured, and I said, okay, that's a really nice picture. That's what we call a book. So the idea is I just go out there and I find letters, archives, bits of forgotten data that happens. And, no one really knows about this, or no one's really thought through this. And I say, okay, well, let me tell you what I think this means. That's me making order. So I feel like I try to imagine what I'm doing is just following the will of God in the world in my own small way. There's something that's unknown or unseen or chaotic, and I say, this is what it means. Okay, I mean, I'm ordering things that appear to be chaotic and saying, no, it actually is an order to it. I'm an active agent making order, and I think all of us in your own fields are called by God to make order out of chaos. And I think Satan and the world lead towards chaos, and we have to push against the chaos and make order out of it. In our family, in my work as a historian, as fathers, as sons, as brothers and sisters. Let me take another hard shift. Before I was going to be a historian, at one point I was going to be an English major. Any English majors out there? Anyway, you ever hear about this book called Ulysses by a guy named James Joyce?
Yeah.
I thought I had a copy. It's like this thick. I gotta say, this is probably the book that made me not want to be an English major. It was like the book that all English majors read their sophomore year in college. It's like the rite of passage. I'm biased here because I love English literature. I'm sorry. I know everyone loves. I do not like James Joyce. I don't like his book. Basically, it's about a man walking through, I believe, Dublin, Ireland, and it's a long book that nothing happens as far as I can tell. He just wanders and has thoughts and experiences, and I'm looking for the plot line. I'm looking for the hero, the action, the villain, the fight. The damsel, and it's like nothing happens. I mean, it's basically it's a modernist book. It's deeply interior. It's a famous book. Apparently, all smart people love it except for me. And it's just like this guy thinking about himself, wandering through. It's like Odyssey, except that Ulysses. He's just thinking, and you're trying to wait for the plot to pick up, and then you close the last page like, what was that about? And it seems, well, random and chaotic and unstructured. And I think the reason why English scholars love it is that it's a job of the literary scholar to go into this collection of what appears to be randomness and pull out the order and meaning, all right, and then impose their meaning onto it. I think it's interesting for a couple of reasons. It's a modernist book, meaning, I mean, there's something like the existentialist spirit going through this James Joyce. James Joyce is saying, a lot of times books and stories have a narrative structure that we've kind of gotten used to. First, third setting, second, third, conflict, last, third, resolution. All books and movies and narratives we've gotten accustomed to a certain pacing, certain plot structure. And that plot structure gives a sense of reassurance. Like, you see a good movie that goes kind of low, you feel good about it, I think most movies and books that we like are probably like 70% redundant and 30% original. The 70% actually is not boring. It gives us reassurance. You know what to expect. It sort of reassures the way, it confirms the way you think the world's supposed to go. The 30% originality is the part that keeps you from getting bored. If a movie or a book were 99% original, I think you would hate it. It's just so weird. It doesn't follow any kind of pattern. You would feel uncomfortable, disrupted, and confused the whole time. I think what James Joyce is doing, Ulysses, is saying, like the existentialist, that narrative structure that you're so reassured of, that's a load of crap. That's just crap we made up. Life is really like this, kind of boring, kind of chaotic, kind of meaningless. You're just wandering through with no apparent purpose, having thoughts. I mean, I think that's an observation of a modern person talking about the modern world, very much like Heidegger, the existentialist. And then I find it even more odd that the modernist literary scholars are then trying to impose meaning onto it, pulling meaning out of it, suggesting there's a yearning for meaning, or that there in fact is meaning. There's something deeply conflicted, I think, about this whole project. I bring it up because, again, I think there's something about chaos that makes us uncomfortable. And whether order is real or not, we humans yearn for order. Getting back to the historical story that we opened up with, this chaotic world, the rape of Dinah, few observations. Again, this is chaos. It's sinful, and chaos and sin is progressive, meaning that it just gets worse like cancer. If you have cancer in your body, if you just ignore it, it doesn't get better. It doesn't stand still. It just gets worse. And this is sin run amok. Is there any human way to work this out? Right? Without God, how does this get better? How does it get resolved? It doesn't look promising. This is in the book of Genesis. And what follows after the book of Genesis? The book of Exodus. And what does God do in the book of Exodus? Well, he gives us the 10 commandments and all the Levitical laws. What's God doing? I think God is slowly, patiently giving his people, okay, here's some rules. Here's some laws. This is how I want to, I'm telling you how to structure your life, telling you how to structure your society. And later on, what does God give us hundreds of years later, thousands of years later? He gives us Christ. And what does Christ do in our world? We often, in my tradition, the way I was raised, I know that Jesus died for my sins and Jesus wants to redeem me. But that is true. But Jesus, as a more older person, I would read the Gospels. I was so confused because he kept saying, I'm here to inaugurate the kingdom. The kingdom of God is at hand. I thought, what's that got to do with Jesus saving my soul? Well, I mean, he's saying this is a kingdom. I'm a ruler. The kingdom has laws and structure, traditions, a way of doing things. What Jesus is doing, and this is a whole nother thing, but I think sure I knew this already, but he is instituting a new order. He's inaugurating a kingdom, a new dominion. And saying we're inaugurating a kingdom, it's fulfilled, but not yet. This is the story of Christianity. It's God progressively saving us from chaos. And so I think we can think of our faith as the story of humanity, the story of creation as order versus chaos. God is fighting chaos all the time. Satan and the natural sin of the world is pushing for order, for chaos, and God is pushing order on it. I think your own life, I mean, I think of my life as kind of like a needle, right? Every day you make a decision. Do I wake up or not? Do I make my bed or not? Do I go to work or not? What do I do at my work? How do I treat my colleagues? How do I treat my students? And every decision can put the needle more towards chaos or more towards order. I'm not a very powerful, influential guy. I never really wanted to be. I try to be good to my colleagues. I have a few students. I go to church. I'm gonna try to be a good neighbor. Yet with every decision, I think I'm called by God to make the world slightly more ordered. I could make it more chaotic, but I think that's what we're all called to do. Right? Hope that makes sense.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was more of a random, risky thing I was trying to, but okay.
Yeah.
You know, what occurred to me, Mike, as you were going through that is, you know, the old joke about if you're trying to carve a horse out of a piece of wood, how do you do it? Well, you just go and get rid of everything that doesn't look like a horse.
I didn't know
So
that. I like that.
That type of art is a way of creating order from chaos. And financial modeling. There are folks that, you know, you read contracts, you read the newspaper, you look at economic trends, you sit down with a spreadsheet and you create a financial model. And you're creating an ordered reflection of reality, you know, through that financial model. And I guess I never really thought of history that way, as you've described it, to go collect all those rocks and make order out of them and put them into categories. And when you reflect on that, you have an article or a book. It was powerful images. Much appreciated.
Thank you. I think we all do I think all of us are actually building order if you think about that metaphor in your life and in your occupations as well. Or even in your family. It could be chaotic.
More chaos than order.
Yeah, but we fight against the chaos every day. But the natural state of our family is just chaos.
So, Mike, as a geologist, I commend you for your metaphor of collecting rocks out of the field and sorting them and categorizing them. It's kind of ironic because as I look at the history of the science of geology, the Earth seemed pretty chaotic to most observers, and we look at the history of the evolution of the Earth, and we see that we've been able to unravel what appeared to be chaos to find that the Earth actually has order. It has a process. Its materials get jumbled up, but the process is fairly well predictable, but it's taken a long time to figure it out.
Yeah.
Not to go further into the weeds, there's
Oh, go ahead.
get further into the weeds, there's these laws of thermodynamics, meaning because they explain the natural world. And the third law of thermodynamics is everything tries to approach this higher level of chaos. So for example, when the leaves fall off the tree in the fall, they don't fall into neat little piles. And that's sort of the natural order of things. And it's interesting that things that happen naturally are chaotic. I guess it's our role to kind of put them into nice little piles.
Yeah. I mean, if you really want, I mean, I had several more metaphors, but that was going to take us another 2 hours. But I remember learning in my biology class, I was really impressed by it. I mean, my teacher said, your body is basically a series of very carefully calibrated chemical reactions. And so I think about it, like, I mean, I had a fever of like 99 and I was feeling miserable. My normal temperature is 98.6. and I was just up by 1 degree and I felt horrible, you know? Like your body is just so carefully calibrated that even a little bit to the left or the right, up and down, makes you feel horrible. And then a little bit more, you're gonna be dead. So I think our decomposing body is like the leaves. You just sort of turn into nothing. But your body is shoving energy into your, I don't have the right, your body's creating, using energy to create an order, you know what I mean?
Mm.
It's almost like life is a natural.
So,
But,
Mike,
but if you don't keep the chemical reaction up, you're gonna die. It's like you have to keep pushing it up all the time. And you're dead when you just stop pushing energy into it.
So Michael, do you think that there's a parallel between the appeal of Ulysses to English scholars and the appeal of Seinfeld to the common man?
Let's think through that now.
Oh,
Because wasn't Seinfeld considered, wasn't the whole plot line, it was a show about nothing?
No, it's about nothing. Yeah. Yeah, I think so, maybe. Yeah. I
But with
think
a lot more humor.
Humorous
another
too.
metaphor I was gonna bring up was I was raised on I was raised, I was raised on TV, the sitcom. 20 minutes long without the commercials. Things like Cosby Show or When Our Family Ties. It structures me. I've been thinking about how much that structured my brain. You begin with every episode is a carte blanche. Nothing carries over from the previous episode. There's a pleasant family, small conflict, crisis and resolution. Everyone's laughing in the living room on the couch. Next episode, everything's resolved in 20 minutes. And I think, actually, I used to rewatch old TV shows with my kids. And my kids are like, this is so boring, Dad. I'm like, yeah, it is kind of boring, actually. Except I think, again, we watch these old TV shows that are 99% redundant and predictable. It was a ritual that Americans went through to reassure themselves that things were predictable. And so your own life and marriage is a crappy chaos. But for 20 minutes, you enter a world where things are structured in a certain kind of way. And I think that gives us, our brains, a certain conditioning that that's how the world's supposed to go. It doesn't actually, but yeah, there's a yearning for that. And I think Seinfeld's saying, no, it's not actually. It's really crappy.
No,
The same could be said for the patterning and the scripting of these reality.
Yes.
I mean, you can
Reality
put
TV
TV
shows.
on, not
Oh,
watch.
yeah.
And if it's 17 after the hour, you kind of know what's going on. Maybe not the names of the participants, but you know what's going on in the program.
No, my,
Yeah, and I think the yearning for these terrible sitcoms or reality shows is that it's our search for order in the chaos of our own lives. But these shows are terrible, and upon rewatching them, it's so horrible and dull. But it's a very boringness that you ever see that? I used to watch it. They're like 95th season Law and Order. Actually, Law and Order. I just thought that, that it's like they're all the same. Every episode's the same. But I think people watch it with some kind of reassurance that it's almost liturgical, actually, isn't it?
Is there any more blatant example than, and you might be too young for this, Mike, Get Smart?
Yeah, I know that one.
Remember the program Get Smart?
Yeah,
And he
yeah.
battles against what?
Chaos.
Chaos.
That's right. I never thought about that.
yeah,
So actually, there's an article here: Law and Order, Get Smart, Chaos Order.
well,
I'll
and
tell you one thing. I used to go to Episcopalian church for many years, and I thought it was weird at first, given my background. I started going to Episcopalian church in college because I would wake up late on Sunday, and that's the only church that had a late service I could walk to. And I would just go there every Sunday. This is so weird. This is so not my background. But by the time I left college, I tried to go back to another church that was more akin to what I was raised in. I thought, I really miss the smells and bells. I miss the first I thought it was so boring. They do the same thing every week. And then when I got older, I was like, I really miss doing the same thing every week. The reassurance that the liturgy never changed, that whatever happens in my life, the liturgy will be the same. I don't know. I know something very ordered and structured about that. Some structure and order, like sitcoms, is garbage, but the order and structure of our worship is actually beautiful and godly, and it's a very repetition that is just so soothing.
well, you can talk about Seinfeld or you can talk about Law and Order, but I think one of the best examples of that predictability is the a Hallmark Christmas movies.
Oh. Oh. Hallmark is in the process of destroying destroying Christmas,
Yeah. Mhm.
because I do at 10 o'clock, I can't get to bed. I will, what do they call it when you go from station to station on television?
Channel surfing.
Surfing. I go surfing. And every night there are at least half a dozen Christmas romances. And I've watched some of them. And
Yeah.
I have yet to find a Christmas romance that mentions Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Not one.
So
They'll go as far as a manger
Yeah.
and a few sheep.
Yeah.
But they never name
Mhm.
Jesus Christ.
It's Saturnalia, Ted.
Yeah. Quickly, thinking of order and chaos. And I firmly believe that there's a purpose in the creation, and that it happens that man, as the most complex thing that's ever been created or developed, with 2 billion neurons in our brains, there's a purpose, and God enunciated that purpose so brilliantly in the first covenant in Genesis 12. I'm your God, you're my people, and you'll be a blessing. Now, three chapters later in Genesis 15, the whole purpose is perverted down to land. You're my God, I'm your God, you're my people, and this is your land, and I give it to you. And 2 chapters later, in Genesis 17, that God's purpose is further perverted by the circumcision. And the story of Dinah and Shechem is an off-ramp from that perversion. And gradually, when you think of the gradual limiting of the worldview of Jews, it isn't until God says, whoa, wait, enough, I'm going to send my son. And he'll straighten things out. And Matthew 25 is the final word of God on that subject. And Peter understood this, and Paul understood it. And here we are today as Christians, 3,000 miles away from Jerusalem.
Yeah, again, the Advent season is God like an alien force entering a closed system, saying, I will order this. It doesn't order it. Humanity and planet Earth is not a self-ordering system. It takes outside energy to structure it. Like your body will die on its own. It needs a constant input of an outside energy. Yeah. And this Christmas is the perfect time to reflect on the alien force of God invading us.
Mike,
another
Mike, keep going with your history. I do fully intend to see Archbishop James Usher up in heaven, as well as Isaac Newton. I'll see if he spent Isaac did the last 30 years. He was interested in ancient civilizations.
Yeah.
All of your area, Mike, that you're into is history, Christian history or world history, whatever you want to call it. I am too, Mike. I'm working it from the lay side of the coin, but I work it because I think I'm going to see these guys, and particularly the way you get seen is by believing, repenting, and believing. Don't circumvent John the Baptist and Jesus. You repent, you believe in Jesus, and they believed in Jesus before the Word. I'm sorry, Moses. I'm sorry, Abraham. I'm sorry, Noah. The seed of the woman will crush or bruise the head of the snake. You guys get me back into the Garden of Eden. I don't want those angels keeping me out. I want the tree of life. So at any rate, I do the same thing that you're doing as a PhD. I do it as a lay guy. I study this deeply, but I study because I'm not going to study Goethe. I'm going to study Luther. Sorry, Goethe. I'm not studying you. I'm not sure if you're up there or not. I'm sorry. There you go.
So there's an interesting irony in the end of this chapter where Jacob criticizes his 2 sons for their actions. And the irony is that they were deceptive in order to advance their purpose. And Jacob, he's kind of the poster boy for being deceptive in order to advance his purposes.
Yeah.
And I just looked ahead to chapter 39, after Jacob has criticized his sons and they said, what should we have treated our sister like a prostitute? That God takes Jacob back to Bethel, where God appeared to him. And I wonder if part of that was God saying, hey, Jacob, you're not so high and mighty. You've just influenced them to live the same way you're living. And as a family therapist, our past is not locked in, but we do have a tendency to repeat the patterns and values that we learned growing up.
Yeah. The Bible doesn't elucidate it, but it's not hard to imagine that, Jacob, either biologically, you get the kids you deserve, or he taught them something. The kids picked something up.
Yeah.
That tendency was there, wasn't it? They saw his father acting a certain kind of way.
For good and for bad.
Yeah.
So,
That's a really good point.
When the kids are really young, they don't have the maturity to be able to discern that your parents' actions are bad. They tend to emulate it, right? They say, well, if my mother and father are doing this, this must be the way I should. And so they kind of osmote it, maybe not necessarily. Right. And you have to unlearn that when they get to be teenagers. And of course, that's one of the reasons why that's such a difficult transition from childhood to adulthood.
Yeah. I was talking to my wife about, I took an Enneagram test. I say, oh, it's really disturbing. I mean, can't believe how accurate it was. And they rattled down and my kid's like, yeah, that's you, Dad. I'm like, what? You know me? It's like, yeah, your kids know you. Yeah.
You talk about order and chaos, and I can't think of who and what the situations that caused this thought to come to my mind. But when you're reading Genesis 2 before the fall, and life is perfect and it only mists at night, and you don't have to do work, you just enjoy God's creation. And then to top it off, we're all running around naked so I could see my wife anytime I want. If that was the permanent existence, would we continue to enjoy it, or would we get bored by the structure? Do we have this some kind of flaw in us that looks for some kind of chaos in the midst of structure in order to then have it be resolved?
But Revelation tells us that it will be like that again sometime.
I sure hope it's not boring. And I sure hope we're wearing clothes. I'm a lot older now.
You'll have perfect bodies.
That's what I tell my wife every day.
Scott, you were talking about, how kids emulate their parents when they're very young.
Yeah.
A story I heard a while ago, a long time ago, and I have always kept in the back of my mind, the family going to the admissions spot where you buy tickets to get into a museum, and it's, kids under 5 are free, and you got a tiny 6-year-old with you. And do mom and dad buy a ticket for that 6-year-old or not? And the person behind the desk doesn't really know whether the kid's 5 or 6, but the 6-year-old child knows that he's 6. And it's a behavior that you can't afford to risk the price of a ticket for creating an attitude in your child that it's okay to get away with something if you think you might not get caught. It's a very strong story.
Absolutely.
Good reminder. Mike, could you close this in prayer, please?
I'd love to. Lord, we thank you for this time. We thank you for this gathering. We don't take anything for granted. all the big blessings and small blessings, we thank you for and retribute to your kindness and mercy. This small gathering, we are blessed by this and we don't take for granted. Thank you for loving us and not leaving us to our own devices. On our own, we would create chaos, create drama, and destroy ourselves and everyone around us. We'd immolate our world. We kind of are, actually. But you so love the world that you sent your only son. You love this world. You love this world and you care about it so much that you invade our world as a godly, lovely alien force to impose order upon our lives, order that we fight against, we retch against, we kick against it. But without the order, we are lost and doomed. And your order is good. It's not heavy. It's not cruel. It's a loving, godly order. And it is what gives us life. And we thank you for that order. May we love it, embrace it, and be grateful as we live under it, knowing that through your order, you set us free from our own worst tendencies and the tendency to destroy ourselves and those around us. We ask you for your holy order throughout this week until we meet again. And we ask for mercy upon those who are driving right now in this not so great weather. In Christ, we pray, amen.
Amen.
Amen.